Hi, welcome to the video on metaphrasing and gapping. Hopefully this will be a nice supplement to what's in the textbook already, but if you do have any questions, do email me or rewind and rewatch and see if you understand. But without further ado, let's get started with metaphrasing. Alright, let's take a look at metaphrasing now. So when we start with metaphrasing, we immediately think, okay, we need our SVDO model, right? This is our basic transitive sentence pattern, okay? So most sentences we see are going to have a subject, a verb, and a direct object. So we take a look at this first one. We have Philios et Dominos, and we see we have Philios as an accusative. We have our conjunction, okay, meaning it connects two things. We have an accusative on one side, and we say, okay, we have an accusative on the other side. We also then have our accusative plurals and a conjunction connecting them. We still need a subject, we still need a verb, although now, because we have accusatives, we have our direct objects, right? So when we're looking at this, we say subject, verbs, the sons, and the masters. Notice we don't have our subject and our verb, so we just leave those as our variables S and V. Which also notice the detail. These are accusative plurals. In the English, we have plurals, okay? So be very specific about what you're doing when you're metaphrasing. I love to put these on vocabulary tests because you have to translate and you have to be very specific and you have to know what they're doing in a sentence. It tests your Latin abilities and your abilities to know, to memorize vocab. So it's a really, really good exercise. Impedit furem, here, we say, okay, we have our T ending on impedit, probably have a verb. We have an EM ending on furem, that probably means direct object because it's accusative, right? So what are we missing? We're still missing our subject, so we have to leave that as our S. We do have our verb this time. Okay, so subject impedes, and then what does the subject impede? We have our direct object. It impedes the thief. I hope this is coming pretty clearly, but this next one is going to be a little bit trickier. If we look at your chart, this ES ending on ocasiones is going to be two things. It can be nominative plural or accusative plural. Remember, this is from the third declension. So that ES ending is going to mean two things. So we have two possibilities. We have two answers here. We're going to have the opportunities verb, the DO, or subject plus verb, the opportunities. Remember again, we have plurals because we have our nominative or accusative plural here. Okay? I want you to also note, like I said before, we're translating these into English as we do the metaphrase. Okay? So we're basically building a translation without knowing exactly what the whole sentence is. Okay? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Alright, so let's take a look at gapping again. Remember, gapping is what occurs when you have things in another clause that you still need in this clause, and you're gonna assume that they're there. Okay? So this is where your metaphrasing expectations are going to come into play. If you're expecting a direct object and you don't have one, but there's one in the clause next to it, you're going to take that direct object out because you don't want to be redundant in Latin, just like you don't want to be redundant in English. We don't say I want to go to the store and I want to buy milk and I want to buy cheese and I want to buy butter. You assume the I want to buy, and you would say I want to go to the store and buy milk, cheese, butter, etc., etc. So keep that in mind. Note that we're dealing with a language. It's not just a series of words that we're dealing with that are kind of like a puzzle. All right. So let's look at this first one. We can say, okay, we have für is a nominative, so let's label it as our subject. Furem is our accusative with the em ending, so we're going to use that as a direct object. And cognoscit with our t ending. All right, we're gonna deem as a verb. So we have a full clause here, SVDO. We can end a sentence here, except when we see et, it keeps it going. Just like when in English you hear and, you're expecting something else. So over here we have lupus, okay, and we say, okay, that's a US ending. It's got to be the subject. And we see lupum with the UM ending. That means it has to be accusative. It means it's the direct object. What are we missing on the side of the et? We're missing our verb. So if we're missing a verb on one side, but we have one over here, what we do is we gap cognoscit over here, and that acts as your verb. So now we can say the thief knows a thief, and a wolf knows a wolf. Now, even in English, we might say a thief knows a thief and a wolf a wolf. That makes sense in English too, but we do need to understand that cognoscit still applies here. Okay? Let's take a look at the second one. Vitam fortuna regit non sapientia. Now, just like the last sentence here, we have our direct object, our subject, and our verb. So we have all three parts in the first part of this. Non sapientia, we have kind of as a tack onto the end of the sentence. And this is just nominative. So we just have a subject, which means we have to gap in our direct object, vitam, and our verb, regit. Okay? Now, I also want to point out that we can just as easily have our subject, our verb, and our direct object all over here and only have our subject over here. We can gap backwards. That is possible. All right. In English, that doesn't really happen as much, but in Latin, that's just as common. Okay, so just be aware it can go both ways. It can go backwards and forwards in Latin. All right, so let's take a translation break here and say, fortune rules life. Sapientia does not. Again, you hear in the English that we're gapping in the life and the ruling, but we still have to say sapientia, the new subject. The idea is something like fortuna rules life. Fortune, rules life. Wisdom does not. Okay? Alright, so just keep in mind, final thoughts on gapping. It's just a giant use of expectations. If you expect something else and it's in another clause, bring it in. Just like we did up here with cognoscit, where you're expecting a verb up here, we brought in the one from the other side. Over here, we expected a direct object and a verb. We don't have them over here, so we bring them over. Okay? I want to point out though, this is just recognition of something that we always do naturally. So if this naturally comes to you and you think this is really stupid and obvious, yes, but I do want you to be able to tell me that thing that's obvious, which is why we're doing gapping. Okay? Next slide. I hope this was helpful for understanding both metaphrasing and gapping. If you have any questions, do email me, or at this point, rewind and rewatch each of the slides and sections to see if that helps as well. But if you still have lingering questions, do email me. Have a good one.